Okay, the next step in the maintenance procedure is I am actually going to change out the coolant. Okay, before we get started, you can see that I actually created a small trough that leads to my drain pan. I propped the drain pan up on an old milk crate just so that I would avoid excessive splashing because I don't want coolant splashing everywhere. The bolt that you see here with the little red mark on it, that is actually the engine block drain bolt, so that will allow us to drain all of the coolant out of the block. There is another way in which you can drain the coolant, and that is by using the radiator drain. Personally, I feel as though this method is the easiest. Some people like to remove the lower radiator hose, but again, I just prefer to use the engine drain bolt. That way I can just drain the block and go from there. Next, I'm going to use a 17mm wrench to break the drain bolt free. I'm not going to remove the drain bolt the entire way at this point. I do have a 17mm socket, but unfortunately it will not fit due to the frame. This would be a perfect application if you have a ratcheting wrench, but unfortunately I do not have a 17mm ratcheting wrench. Next, I'm going to remove the drain bolt the rest of the way by hand. Also, make sure that the washer remains on the drain plug. If you do not see a washer, make sure you look for it. There should be a washer on there. It's a copper color, so it is easy to find. Obviously, you're going to have coolant that runs out immediately, so just be mindful of that. Make sure that your funnel, or in my case, the trough, remains in place and that your drain pan is ready. It's worth mentioning that I intentionally did not remove the radiator cap because I don't want the coolant to flow any faster than it already is. Once this is down to just a drip, then I'm going to remove the cap and allow the remaining coolant to drain from the system. While the coolant is draining, this is a great time to consider subscribing to the channel for more content just like this. And if you could give this video a thumbs up, that would be much appreciated. It greatly helps the channel. Once the coolant is finished draining, I'm going to reinstall the drain plug. Once again, make sure that the washer is on the drain plug before you reinstall it. I'm going to thread it in by hand as far as possible. Next, I'm going to use a wrench to tighten the drain plug up the rest of the way. Pay particular attention to the paint mark as the drain bolt gets snug. You want to make sure that the paint mark is lined back up the same way that it was whenever you removed the drain bolt initially. This is a great way to make sure that you're not over tightening the drain plug. Next, we're going to remove the coolant from the recovery tank. Rather than unbolting the recovery tank, I'm going to remove the hose from the bottom of the tank. You can do this by simply squeezing in on the spring clamp and carefully removing the hose. Make sure that your drain pan is positioned below because you are going to lose coolant in this process. After the coolant has finished draining, you will notice there is still a residual amount that remains in the recovery tank. In order to remove this, we are going to use an air compressor. The first step is you want to remove the yellow cap on the recovery tank and then make sure that your compressor has the blow nozzle attached. In my case, I have a cone-shaped nozzle that actually screws into the blow nozzle. I will leave a link to this in the description of the video. That way you can place this directly on the top of the tank and very easily evacuate the remaining coolant. As you can see, I accidentally had the pressure too high, so I turned it down and it worked much better. You really only need about 10 to 15 psi if you're trying to get this to drain and not spray everywhere like I did initially. And if you keep it at 10 to 15 psi, you should have a nice stream that will fall into the drain pan below. Next, I reattached the hose, and then I used a pair of needle nose pliers to slide the spring clamp back in place. Now it is time to add coolant to the system. I am using Kubota coolant. You do not have to purchase Kubota branded coolant. I purchased it because it was convenient. It does tell you on this particular container, ready to use, do not add water. So whatever coolant you are selecting, make sure you are mindful if it is already mixed with water or if it is full strength and you have to mix it at a 50-50 ratio. You will notice on here that it already says it's 50-50. It's pre-diluted. That's why it tells you do not add water. I should also mention that any of the plain green coolant that you purchase at an automotive store or a department store should work. It is basically just an ethylene glycol based coolant. We are going to begin by adding coolant to the radiator. So all you need to do is remove the radiator cap, and then you're going to want to have a small funnel so that way you don't get coolant everywhere. And then it is as simple as pouring the coolant in until it reaches the top right below where the cap sits on the radiator. If you haven't already, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. In case you're wondering, the coolant capacity for the BX23S is 3.3 US quarts. Keep in mind that we obviously did not get every single drop of coolant out of the tractor, and I should also mention that the 3.3 US quarts includes the recovery tank. As you are filling the radiator with coolant, you may hear gurgling sounds. That's because the air in the system is working its way out. That's why I keep pouring the coolant and then rechecking the level, because I could hear that. You want to make sure that when you're all done, the coolant is up to the neck on the radiator where the radiator cap fastens. While I finish filling the radiator with coolant, I do want to provide you with a pro tip, and that is, do not allow the unit to sit without coolant for an extended period of time. Personally, I would not allow it to sit without coolant even overnight. And the reason for that is you may find that the radiator hoses will dry up. This could involve them cracking or even basically making it that they are compressed, that they're sucked in and they're not holding their shape anymore. So just be careful with that. I highly recommend that if you're going to drain the coolant, you have the coolant on hand to fill the system back up as soon as possible. After the radiator is full, it's time to reinstall the radiator cap, and then we are going to move on and fill the recovery tank with coolant. So all you need to do is remove the cap on the recovery tank. You're going to want to use a funnel once again, just like you did for the radiator, and you want to pour coolant into the recovery tank so that the coolant is up to the H mark. So you can see that there is an L for low and there is an H for high. Anytime you do a coolant change, you want to refill the tank all the way up to H. And one of the reasons for this is it is very possible that there are still air pockets in the system, and this way the unit has a way to recover coolant if necessary, hence the term recovery tank. Okay, the final step in the process is to start the engine and allow it to run for a few moments. Then you're going to give it a minute or two to cool, and you're going to check the level of the recovery tank. If it needs additional coolant, go ahead and add coolant up to the H mark, and that is how you change coolant on a Kubota BX. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Please consider subscribing and give this video a thumbs up.